Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of At the Eyepiece. It's kind of a different way of doing things this go around that I'm going to do. Um, I am going to essentially describe and give you this presentation here on the build of the observatory build that I did. As you can see here up on the screen, this is a finished build. So to give you a nutshell kind of quick review, this is a standard 10 by 16 shed. And this is, let's see here, this is 8 foot walls. And the observatory portion of this, or I should say where the scope is housed, is that small 4 by 8 addition, or maybe it's a 6 by 8. I think it's 6 by 8 addition that I made on the right, and that is a roll-off roof. I will go through and describe you, and we'll get to seeing kind of where I started and where I progressed. So let's go to our photos here, and let me see here. Let me backtrack a bit, and let's go to kind of where I started. So, as a visual observer, this was kind of primary my setup at my old place, by the way. You can see very much in the backyard. Your neighbors are right there. Fortunately for me, they did not have their porches on at all, much at all. And the one neighbor that I had was really great, kind. In fact, I invited them over quite a few times to take a look through the scope with me, and we enjoyed that. And they were kind enough to turn the lights off, when they knew I was outside and stuff. So that was pretty cool. And I was, again, very fortunate that my immediate neighbor did not leave their back porch on, and none of my back, right to the right there of this image, none of my immediate neighbors back there either. But I really enjoyed the visual work with this particular instrument. This was the Meade light switch. I think this is the 8-inch version. I had both the 6 and the 8. My reviews of those are on my blog, by the way, and on Cloudy Nights if you go there. But they were really fun instruments to use. Visually, they were just a blast. But where I wanted to go was more or less not necessarily astrophotography, but sharing online. I really got the whole, at that time it was called visual, well, I guess it's still called video astronomy basically, but more or less now it's basically electronically assisted astronomy, or I actually prefer electronically assisted observing because that's kind of really what you're doing. But anyway, I digress. That little pull along tote there housed my eyepieces, my charts, my filters, everything. It was nice to drag along there with the light switch. Let's see if this will go through. Okay, so yeah, this will go through nicely. This is my observatory at my old place. So basically, that is a 8-inch diameter sonotube buried about maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet maybe, into the ground there with concrete. It's solid concrete in the tube, coming up to 3 screws and I actually used a wooden base plate. Yes, I know a lot of people out there, and of course I understand why. A lot of people out there say don't make your scope base out of wood, but I did. And you know what? It worked wonderfully for me. Get a nice, real nice hard wood, and I think you'll be fine for the casual work that I was doing. Then I went ahead, I think this was purchased from Lowe's actually. This is, I think, a Suncrest vertical storage building, basically they call it. And as you can see, I cut out the diameter of my tube so that I could easily slide this right on over the scope. Now, it's important to note here that this was strictly to house the mount, not the mount with the scope on it. In fact, I take the scope off, I take the counterweights off, and even with those things off, this thing barely fits in there. But it worked perfectly for my initial setup. Now, I housed the optical tube and the cameras and things like that inside the house. Actually, you can see it right there on the left. There is the door to a closet that was an outside closet, but it worked wonderfully to house the scopes and stuff. And it was more secure than being in the shed. Not that it was unsecure. Well, actually, yeah, it was. It was unsecure, and I was kind of paranoid about things getting wet and stuff like that, but it actually worked great. There's the cutout you can see for sliding that right on over. No wheels or anything else. I mean, this thing is super, super light. And that's just to show you there really wasn't any, space at the top there for any leaks. But again, I was more or less kind of paranoid. Here in Middle Tennessee, we do get quite a bit of heavy thunderstorms. And the wind, I can tell you, can get really going. And I was concerned with this popping off and such, and that's why I actually had the scope as well covered up with another tarp. I should say the mount with a tarp. Let's go through. Okay, so here's my daytime setup. This is me doing white light. I had a little table there that I could put into the shed that worked wonderful. Basically just a board resting on the edges there. They had these little notches in there. It worked great. A little laptop, and that was the CG5 mount with the 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain on it. And yeah, this was old school. This was a Sony SCB 2000 video camera modified for video astronomy because I really like doing video astronomy and sharing it online through a variety of places such as the virtual star party back then, and even Night Skies Network. So you can see pretty modest equipment, really. But I tell you, that CG5 mount, man, I had that thing really dialed in. It was a phenomenal mount for tracking. I wish I could find a picture of the PHP graph back then, but wow, it was great. Go-tos were okay. And it was not very good at actually, I think in the Nexstar controller, it's referred to as hibernation. It really wasn't very good coming out of hibernation and then being able to go to a target. My Ioptron mount that I use now is way better at that. I mean, just really great go-to accuracy after being from the park position. Just works phenomenally well. But this was a great setup too, considering it's a very, very modest setup. And that's a little bit more in detail. As you can see, the great little Me DSi2 camera there. I use that for both guiding as well as actual electronically assisted astronomy. That product with Envisage, the auto or the Me Envisage program really worked very, very well. And you can see a little bit better here with the wood. That's probably 3/4 inch. And it was a very hard wood. And the 3 screws there, that plate was leveled. And yeah, I just have the CG5 mount tightened down on that pretty tight. And that was a little converted 8x50, I think, finder, which was used as the guide scope. And that was my setup for a while. You could see how close the neighbors are. I mean, we were in a light polluted area. But fortunately, like I said, I didn't get much lights back there. It really worked well. I did lock the, you can see a little lock there on the shed, vertical storage shed, when of course it was not in use. And that's just, the AutoStar Envisage program. That's me using a Batimov mask, I think they call it. And that's me doing some live astronomy. This was the actual setup that I used back in 2014, part of the virtual star party, when we didn't get the supernova going off there in M82. If you want to know more about that, just go on over to either the blog or the YouTube channel, or gosh, you can look up virtual star party and you can find that video on M82 there. It's kind of a funny story. But anyway, let's go through here. So now we fast forward to at the new place. Basically, you can see a much bigger area for me to observe, not a whole lot of immediate lights blocking. And this was just the start. As you can see, I kind of plopped another sono tube down, another 3 bolts there coming through. That white tube there was to house the cables, the USB cables, the data cable for controlling the scope. And this was my setup here. And this was actually, yeah, this looks like a C-Gem mount. I really liked actually the C-Gem mount. It was an impressive looking mount. And I probably did not give that mount enough time, really. I just thought that it should have been performing better than it was as far as tracking goes. And I don't know. I kind of should have given that mount a little bit more time because it was actually an impressive mount from its physical stature, if you will. And this is just a little bit of a different angle. This is the CG5 mount, actually. This was a daytime little setup there that I was doing. Now, behind there, to the right, is actually the 10 by 16 storage shed. This has got double doors there. You can't see it all, but that's double doors. And, you know, I would set it up, and I would run the cables from that tube on the end of the scope, and I could then, once the scope was set up and aligned and everything, I could be inside the storage building here and controlling the telescope and imaging at the same time in relatively, you know, comfort. So that was a setup for the longest time. Here's another angle here. That gives you the full, you know, the full image here of the setup. Of course, it had its drawbacks. The main drawback was I had to set it up every single time I wanted to observe. And you may say, well, why didn't you just go ahead and bring that vertical storage building there and do the same setup? Well, here's a few concerns with that. Number one, I was actually more concerned with, I was new to the neighborhood. I didn't know really if there were any, you know, very snoopy people around. I didn't feel comfortable really leaving the mount out there in that storage shed, in addition to the weather. I mean, I had a very open space around here, and wow, we could get some really nasty thunderstorms, and that down, I think they call it the downdraft there, just was very strong. And I just could not think of a good way that the scope would be more protected. And I really, really wanted to be able to leave the scope, optical tube, camera, all that stuff together and have it ready to go. So a good while, man, I was, you know, in analysis paralysis of what I was going to do. At some point, I even contemplated going to a full-blown roll-off roof, but, you know, I didn't really have a lot of people that could help me out with that, and I certainly wasn't about to do that myself. And to be honest with you, the shed was still in a rent-to-own period, so, you know, I couldn't do something drastic like that. So I was just getting more and more the idea of, well, I do mostly electronically assisted observing, so what kind of, you know, what can I come up with? So I came up with this. I said, well, why don't I simply build a housing for the scope? Because I'm concerned about wind, okay, and I'm concerned about also hail. I'll back up just a moment because I also was contemplating putting the scope out there, camera, maybe not the camera, but at least the scope, you know, leaving it all set up, ready to go at a moment's notice, but in like a Telegizmo 365 cover. But I had read some things online about those covers, and I actually was a bit concerned about the heat because it does get very hot and humid here. And then, you know, the other concern I had is with the thunderstorms that we get through, we do get hail from time to time. And I just did not want to go ahead and have this scope out there. Of course not, with the possibility of hail coming down on it in something like the Telegizmo, just the cover. So that's where I said I need something more semi-permanent, more protective. And that's when I came up with this idea. So this is basically a 8 by 6 addition that I've made onto the 10 by 16 shed. plywood there on the side, good thick plywood for the flooring. And I'm using 2x6 for essentially the bottom framing and the floor joists, etc. You can kind of see in the lower left in the back image here where the shed is, and those concrete little bars there. That's the footers basically. There's two of them. One, I think I have each on one corner, and then I have at least, I think, four more underneath. And they are there for support, obviously, and they're buried down. There's two of them, one on top of the other. They're in concrete, plus I have a cement bonding between the two so they don't slip and slide off one another. So that's what I'm using for that. I'm also, and I'll get to this actually later, but it was really a pretty standard, easy way to go as far as the build goes. No real concerns there. This is from another angle. You can kind of see the footers in this image much better. You can see that there's one on each corner, and then what you don't see is, oh yes, there's two more, but they're in the middle in there that you don't see them. Just for support on the flooring from there. I figured it was just a 6 foot wide region, so it really didn't need much support from that. And you can see also that window there is there's two windows for my observatory. AC unit there, and then the other one. Let's go over here. Okay. So we're progressing through quite nicely. Here are the 4x4s that I am using to support the roll-off roof. Roll-off roof was pretty easy to do as well. I went on Amazon and I bought low-profile furniture casters. And I think I got an image of that later on, and they worked very, very well. One of the things that I wanted to do was keep the roof the minimum distance as much as possible between, the roof itself and the wall itself. I didn't want a whole lot of space there, and those low profile casters really worked very well for me. And it all came together actually quite nicely. You will notice here, if you are an astute observer, that I now have no doorway into the shed. Well, that's where that space is there right underneath the ladder. I left that open, obviously, to facilitate me going in and out until I could determine what I wanted to do as far as a door. I had originally had the idea of maybe creating a door just to the left there. But you'll see what I did here in a moment. That's a tin roof, by the way. And that's just, I'm not really sure why I even included that. That's just a picture of the roof, the way I made the roof there. All right, and so here we are. This was pretty much a rush to get through because this image here was taken, I think, about a week before our hurricane had gone through down south in Alabama and was moving up towards Murfreesboro. So I was really concerned about the weather and the rain getting into this thing that I just finished. So I put this tarp underneath or over the top there, weighted it down with a couple of extra concrete blocks that I still had. I tied down the edges, as you can see there. The top portion is actually nailed. I also have some tie wraps to the front of that as well. And any wind coming from that is facing the south, by the way. The roll-off roof pushes towards the south. So the wind, rain would be coming right where that doorway basically is. So I actually had something inside to brace against that too. But as you can see, there's no door. How am I getting in? Well, it's that space there that was underneath the ladder in the previous image. So now we put in a door. This is after the storm. Everything went through pretty good. A couple weeks later, I decided, well, let's get to going on what we're going to do. So I figured, probably the best spot to put a door is where the window was. And so that's what I did. I got rid of the window and I created my own little doorway entranceway there to the new shed. So that's what I did in that image here, and that is an example of the roof completely rolled off. Of course, I did not make a calculation accurately. No surprise there, because I'm horrible with math and numbers. But I was really disappointed because I had thought I had given enough room for the scope to be able to see Polaris from the polar scope, and no, I did not calculate that accurately at all. So if hindsight's 2020, I probably would have either made the roof a little bit taller and thus increased the height of the mount enough perhaps to have seen over the top ridge there to be able to see Polaris, or maybe I simply would have made it a little bit longer and been able to accommodate it that way. But I was able to get pretty much aligned fairly well. And that's another example. So I was coming up with ideas. As you can see, the doors now, the double barn doors, are actually sealed over. And I actually have a half height little space that you can't really see. You'll be able to see this in another image, where I would get in and out of the area where I have the scope. Because as you can also see here from this image, I sealed up the small little entranceway that I had on the outside of the addition. Now I was trying to come up with a way to keep the rain from getting between the roll-off roof and where it butts up against the actual shed itself. And this, I tried an inverted gutter as well as a normal gutter, and it just didn't give the protection that I was hoping for. I still had rain dripping down. I had to come up with another solution for that, because that was actually a huge concern for me. So here we are. This is actually now in the portion that houses the scope. It perfectly clears the roof there at this particular height. This is the park position that works great for that, horizontal there. And as you can tell, there's not enough room really to do visual work back here and be at the scope. At least not for me, but others might be able to, but no. You're going to have some difficulty trying to view things, especially out to the north, but south would be okay, but not really what I was going for anyway. So as you can see, all of the wires I have run through the wall, 2x4s there on the left. There is holes on the bottom there where the tripod legs go through to isolate the scope from the wood floor. Underneath, again, I did 2 blocks of concrete. They are also they're in concrete where I dug, plus they have a concrete bonding between the two. And then on top of that, I also have the scope tripod resting on anti-suppression pads. And yeah, that's about it for that. I do plan actually, or I would like to eventually seal this area in too, meaning just kind of put up, I don't know, some type of plywood there for the walls, and put down maybe like a foam flooring just to make it look really nice. But that'll come much later. Now you might say, why didn't you just build a pier again? Well, this was a relatively new mount, and honestly, I had run into such concerns with mounts. I really wasn't sure what I was going to solidify on. So I had just kept this running on the tripod, and it works quite well for that, in my opinion. And here's the scope in there with just about clearing that's a 4x4 that I have on one end, just to give some rigidity to the roof itself. And it probably an inch of clearance maybe, but it works wonderful. It's just fine for me. And that's the good old scope setup there. And here is more of a final image. This is when everything was painted. Well, everything besides the roof. I still have to paint the roof. I'm not sure if I'm going to go charcoal with the roof or a gray, just like the sides of the walls. And you'll notice there the burgundy canopy. That actually works perfect for keeping the rain and everything from running down between the wall and the roof. It fits perfect. It covers it perfectly. It's 8 foot wide. I think it comes out maybe a foot and a half or 2 feet, and it just works great. So I was fortunate enough to come up with a very simple solution for water coming in. It works really, really well. Painted the posts there, as you can see. And I think now we'll get to the interior. Yep. So here is the interior. This, of course, was just a standard shed. So all of the white paneling, the floor, the baseboard, I did. And I think it came out pretty well. This paneling is called white oak. And I moved the AC, obviously, from the old location right next to where I'm sitting for the computer, which really is great when it's hot because you got that nice cool air blowing on you. But when you're podcasting or when you're broadcasting online, yeah, it adds a lot of ambient noise, so that's kind of a trade-off. But anyway, this desk was just a temporary setup. As you can see, the door over there to the right is a closet door that was available to me from when we purchased the house. They had a closet that didn't have any doors on it. We decided to keep it that way, and the doors have been in the garage ever since. So I used one of those garage door or closet doors to be the door that leads to the outside where the scope is housed. This is the view from the opposite direction there. You can see plenty of room to hold my instruments, my scopes. Bought some storage drawers and such there on the right hand side, and I can just keep all my Astro gear out here, safe, locked up, AC controlled. Works very well. Here's just another image there. That's the great aperture 8012 sitting over there. Yeah, another CG5 mount. Those bins work good to organize, keep eyepieces and charts and cables and other doodads all in those different containers there. AC unit, not sure why that's so small, but that's the just a picture of the AC unit. I framed the window a little bit to make that look nice and clean. Okay, so here you will notice this is relatively recent because I have not only the new table, but my dual monitor display, and I finished the wall at that door. I'm not sure from the previous image that you might, let's bounce back maybe to that so you can see that the door there has just plain wood and there's no white paneling there, while this was now completely closed in and paneled over, and I put a little latch on the door there too. So this is the power strip that controls basically whatever, but the green cable goes to where the scope is. So all I have to do is basically turn on, and this has individual power switches for each one of its outlets. So that's real good. That was something I bought online, Amazon. I think it's made by AAA. And I just hit that switch. It powers on the scope. It powers on the powered USB adapter, which in turn, lets me connect up the cameras, etc., that are out there plugged into it. Let's see here. Let's go through, and that's a little bit blurrier, shakier image, but you get the gist there. An L-shaped desk works great. Dual monitors. Now I use Mac. I do run Windows 10 on the Mac if needed. However, I have been very happy to say that the Lodestar camera is native Mac support, and Paul Shear's great Starlight Live program is also is also Mac native. Well, he has Windows version too. But I also control the scope, the Ioptron mount, with the Sky Safari app. I love that program. So that's why I wanted to keep with using the Mac for that. And that's pretty much what the Mac does now, is pretty much control the scope and gets images and actually does these little videos. Little laptop there that you can see in the foreground, that is my laptop that I use just for guiding. I wanted to keep things minimalized on the Mac, and so I just have the PC there running the guiding program PhD, and it works great. Here's another little shot of the command console, if you will. Another little shot there, and there's my buddy that I get to be observing with comfortably there when we're doing our deal. Let's go back to this video here. This, of course, was very recent too. I did a quick walkthrough here. I'm kind of fast forwarding through another view of the scope. You can see the casters there in this view. Low profile casters work very, very well for the roll off. It's very easy to go on and off. Let's go. Okay, so this is where, of course, the door meets where the barn doors were. And there's, of course, the white door, which goes inside. Now, this kind of tan color was the original color of that paneling that I'm using. So I still have to paint this currently, but you can see how the tarp covers everything up very, very well. There's some residual there from when I tried to seal up the gutters that were deflecting water, but they didn't do a very good job of that. And I will probably wind up, squaring off that area there, cutting it further. But for right now, it works. I just remembered a duck, and it works very, very well. And I can get out to the observatory. Let's just see if we can go through here. All right. Yeah. These little areas where you're seeing is just foam. Lots of wasps in our area, so I'm trying to seal up everything that I can to prevent them from coming in and making nests, but they have already done that. So you can see a little bit of the footer there. Let's work our way inside. Finished off the door a little bit with some, framing just to make it aesthetically pleasing. Trying to get it to where I think, this is an area right above. I haven't finished the ceiling. I'm probably going to put a suspended ceiling down, but this will be a storage area right above the desk area. Basically, I'll put some plywood up there eventually, and that'll just be for storage. Keep the old boxes of stuff here. I think I'm about ready to go outside of the observatory. So those are the cables that run out to the scope. I'm just showing you that. So yeah, I think this is where we're opening the door, the latch there. And there we go. There's the roll-off roof, the 4x4 that I simply push forward. That gives you a good image there of the... Let me back that up a bit here. Probably too much. Yeah, that gives you a good shot here of... I did not do a very good job of measuring. I had them marked. I swear, I had it marked to where those blocks were. But going in and out of this area, and I had it marked with pencil, and it just wore away, and I had to guess. So anyway, that's why there's holes, and they're not really centered looking, and they're not pretty. But anyway, you can see that's where the block is. I got the anti-vibration. I said suspension before. Yeah, anti-vibration pads for the scope itself, and it works great for me. It's a perfect little setup. The other mount there is for daytime solar observing. I just kind of move it more forward, run the cables directly in, put the solar scope on it, either the Coronado or the 60 millimeter with the Quark chromosphere. Shut the door here and latch it, and we're good to go. And then I'm running everything with AC. Now that window there, I do have a blackout curtain that I put up when I'm observing, obviously to cut out the light. So that's about the recap here of the observatory. So I hope that maybe from you seeing this, you might get some additional ideas for what you want to do. Now, I will say one of the nice things about this particular setup is that I really can do whatever I want later on. I mean, if I wanted to extend it out, really, I wouldn't have any problem extending this addition out to accommodate maybe even another scope. I mean, it would really be quite easy to do that. I have also thought of the possibility of actually having a dome um, on top of this addition. Of course, there would be some modifications. I would get rid of the roll-off roof. I would probably have a pier. Obviously, I would definitely have a pier set up, and the dome, something like that. I could even make it wider if I wanted. So I mean, this particular setup leaves the control area of the observatory open with a nice big 10 by 16 area, and it really gives you the freedom to do whatever you want later on. You know, we could even get really fancy, although I don't see myself doing this. I like to kind of keep it separate. Um, Again, convert the actual 10 by 16 and put a dome on that. Um, but yeah, I'm probably going to keep this as is for a very, very long time. So if you have any questions on anything, please leave a comment there on the YouTube video. If you have any comments, I'd love to see your designs too. If you came up with something similar, or if this gave you an idea, I'd love to hear about it. So thanks for watching, and hopefully clear skies so that we can all talk about it next time at the eyepiece.